Imagine this. Your own flesh and blood, the child you raised, stands in a glittering ballroom, toasting to millions, your millions that you've never seen a dime of. What would you do if your name was stolen, your legacy twisted into a lie, and your heart shattered by the one you loved most? I'm Henry Sullivan, and at my son's wedding, I faced a betrayal so raw it burned through every memory we shared. $24 million, they said I had, while I scraped by on stale bread and shame. How far would you go to reclaim your truth when the world laughs at your pain? Welcome to RevengeX, where electrifying stories of betrayal and triumph set your soul ablaze. We're thrilled to have you join our community of viewers who celebrate unyielding resilience and fierce courage. Hit that subscribe button to never miss a heart-pounding tale, and it'd be incredible if you smashed the like button, shared this video, or dropped a comment with the time and city or country you're watching from. Your likes, shares, and heartfelt comments are the greatest spiritual gift, the fuel that keeps this channel burning bright. Now, buckle up for a story that'll hit you right in the feels. Let's dive in. My name is Henry Sullivan, a man who built a life on steel and sweat, a retired oil magnate who once owned half the rigs in West Texas. At 62, I stood in a borrowed tuxedo, its cuffs brushing my knuckles, at my son Ethan's wedding in a glittering Houston ballroom. The chandeliers dripped light like liquid gold, and the air smelled of wealth, crisp linen, vintage champagne, and the kind of perfume that costs more than most people's rent. I'd given everything to get here. Decades of 16-hour days, a fortune funneled into Ethan's ventures, a heart stretched thin to lift him to this moment. But that night, as I stood among Houston's elite, my son raised a glass and shattered my world with a lie so bold it burned the air from my lungs. The room buzzed with 500 guests, oil barons, tech moguls, and socialites, who clapped like trained seals when Ethan, in his tailored Brioni suit, announced he'd been providing me with a monthly allowance of $24 million a year. To ensure my father lives in the luxury he deserves, he said, his voice smooth as polished marble, his arm heavy on my shoulder. The crowd roared, glasses clinked, and eyes turned to me with admiration I didn't earn. Luxury? I lived in a one-bedroom condo with a leaking faucet, drove a rattling Chevy pickup that groaned in the Texas heat, and ate microwave dinners while juggling overdue bills. My hands still carried the calluses of a life spent building his empire, not lounging in it. $24 million. The number was a knife, twisting deeper with every cheer. I stood frozen, my smile a brittle mask, as the lie sank in. Ethan, the boy I'd carried through fevers and failures, had turned me into a prop, a sainted father he could parade for applause. But the betrayal wasn't just his. Beside him, his new bride, Isabella, her gown shimmering like a weapon, fixed me with a stare that wasn't warmth or pride but a cold, glittering triumph. Her lips curled, daring me to speak, knowing I wouldn't. She was the architect of this charade, her ambition sharper than the diamonds at her throat. And then, as if the universe conspired to deepen the wound, a second shock hit. My oldest friend, Marcus Tate, a loyal accountant who'd balanced my books for 30 years, clapped loudest, his eyes avoiding mine. Had he known? Was he part of this? The room spun, the champagne flutes blurring into a kaleidoscope of betrayal. My chest tightened, not just with anger, but with a grief so raw it felt like losing Ethan all over again. I'd given him everything, my savings, my reputation, my dreams, only to be reduced to a line in his wedding toast. But the third blow came when Isabella's brother, Victor, a slick hedge fund manager with a predator's grin, leaned in during the dance and whispered, "You're lucky, old man. Ethan's keeping you relevant." Relevant? I'd sold my company to fund his startup, mortgaged my future to secure his. My heart screamed to call out the lie, to shatter the crystal illusion. But shame chained my tongue. Fathers don't ruin their sons' weddings. Fathers swallow their pain. As the band played and guests swirled, I slipped to the balcony, the Houston skyline blinking coldly below. The December air bit my face, but it couldn't numb the ache inside. My phone buzzed a utility bill, $3,000 overdue, mocking Ethan's millions. I leaned on the railing, my mind a battlefield. Part of me wanted to believe Ethan meant well, that this was a misunderstanding, a flourish of pride. But another part, the part that had survived boardroom betrayals and oilfield busts, knew better. That money wasn't mine. It was going somewhere, somewhere. Isabella's sharp eyes guarded. The realization was a fourth shock, a gut punch. They were stealing from me, using my name to funnel millions into their own accounts, maybe through shell companies or trusts I'd never see. Then came Clara, my former assistant, who'd stayed loyal even after I retired. She found me on the balcony, her face lined with worry, her voice steady as she handed me a glass of water. "Henry, You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, her kindness a lifeline. I told her about Ethan's toast, the millions, the lie. Her eyes darkened and she whispered, I saw Isabella with Victor last week, laughing over papers in Ethan's office. They didn't know I was there. It wasn't right, Henry. Her words were a fifth shock. Confirmation that the betrayal wasn't just a moment but a meticulously planned heist. Clara promised to dig, to watch, to help. Her loyalty was a flicker of light in the dark, but it couldn't erase the weight of Marcus's applause or Victor's sneer. Inside, the party roared on. Ethan's laughter boomed. Isabella's voice cooed darling, and Marcus raised another toast to family values. Each sound was a blade, carving deeper into the man I thought I was. I'd built a legacy, not just for myself, but for Ethan, believing he'd carry it forward. Now, I saw the truth. I was a pawn in their game. My name, a signature on their scam. The sixth shock came as I overheard a guest, a rival oilman named Gerald Hayes, chuckling to his wife. Old Sullivan's set for life, huh? Wish my kids would bankroll me like that. Gerald, who'd once tried to buy me out, now mocked me unknowingly, his words salt in an open wound. My mind churned, torn between love and fury. I wanted to storm the stage, to scream that I was drowning in debt while they toasted my imaginary millions. But the father in me, the one who'd bandaged Ethan's knees and cheered his first deal, begged me to stay silent, to protect him. The conflict was a storm, each wave crashing harder. Loyalty to my son versus the truth of my life. Isabella's gaze found me again, her smile a silent command to stay quiet, to let their lie live. But then, a seventh shock. A waiter, a young man named Luis, slipped me a note as he passed. Check your son's office, Mr. Sullivan. I heard things. Luis, who'd served at my own galas years ago, looked at me with pity and urgency. Another ally, another crack in their facade. I excused myself, my heart pounding like a war drum. The lie wasn't just a betrayal, it was a theft of my identity, my dignity, my life's work. As I stepped into the Houston night, the skyline glaring like a jury, I made a vow. I wouldn't let Ethan and Isabella rewrite my story. I'd fight, not with shouts, but with proof, paper, numbers, truth. Clara's loyalty, Luis's whisper, and my own resolve were my weapons now. The wedding band played on, but the music couldn't drown out the fire in my chest. They thought they'd silenced me, but they'd only awakened a man with nothing left to lose. The Houston night pressed against my skin as I stumbled from the wedding's glittering cage, the weight of Ethan's lie, a $24 million a year allowance still clawing at my chest. My Chevy rattled down a deserted street, the heater coughing like a smoker's lung, useless against the December chill. I pulled into the cracked asphalt lot of my condo, a squat brick building that smelled of damp carpet and regret. Inside, the silence was heavier than the ballroom's applause, broken only by the hum of a fridge that held little more than a half-empty ketchup bottle and a loaf of day-old bread. I sank into a worn recliner, the springs groaning under me, and stared at the stack of bills on the kitchen counter: electricity, water, a car payment I'd begged the bank to defer. Each one was a brick in a wall Ethan and Isabella had built around me, their lie a mortar sealing me in. My phone buzzed again, another notice from the gas company, demanding $2,000 by next week or they'd cut the line. $2,000, not $24 million. The number mocked me, a cruel echo of Ethan's toast. My mind churned, a storm of love and rage. I'd given him my empire, sold my rigs to fund his dreams, and now he stood in a tuxedo, rewriting my life as a charity case while I counted quarters for laundry. The betrayal wasn't just the money, it was the theft of my name, my pride, my place in the world. I wanted to call him, to scream, to demand why he'd draped me in this fiction. But the father in me, the one who'd taught him to throw a baseball, whispered to wait, to protect him still. That whisper was a chain, binding me to silence. Then came the first shock of the night, a knock at the door, sharp and impatient. It was Victor, Isabella's brother, his hedge fund smirk sharper than the whiskey on his breath. Well, look at you, old man, he sneered, leaning against the doorframe, his Rolex glinting like a taunt. Living the high life on Ethan's millions, huh? Bet you're too senile to even count it. His words were street crude, a blade wrapped in a grin, meant to cut deep. I gripped the door, my knuckles white, fighting the urge to slam it in his face. Get out, I said, my voice low, trembling with a fury I hadn't felt since the oil fields. He laughed, a barking sound, and tossed a crumpled envelope at my feet. Check your mail, Pops. Might find something to jog that foggy brain. He swaggered off, his boots scuffing the hallway's peeling linoleum. The envelope held a second shock. A bank statement, not mine but in my name, showing a trust account with $24 million funneled through a company called Vantage Holdings. The address matched Ethan's downtown office, a gleaming tower I'd once helped him lease. My name was scrawled across it, but the signature wasn't mine. A clumsy forgery, the S in Sullivan too sharp, like a stranger's hand had tried to wear my skin. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of betrayal. They weren't just lying, they were stealing, siphoning millions through my identity while I scraped by on Social Security and odd jobs. The realization was a third shock, a gut punch that left me gasping. Isabella wasn't just complicit. She was the puppeteer, her ambition weaving this web. I sank back into the recliner, the room spinning. My mind was a battlefield, love for Ethan warring with the raw wound of his deceit. I saw him at 10, his grin wide as he rode his first bike, my hands steadying the handlebars. Now those hands shook, clutching a lie in paper form. I wanted to believe he'd been manipulated, that Isabella's claws had sunk into him, but the truth was colder. He'd chosen this. He'd chosen her. And Marcus, my oldest friend, his applause still ringing in my ears, had he signed off on this fraud. The thought was a fourth shock, a betrayal layered on betrayal, each one heavier than the last. A soft tap at the window broke my spiral. It was Sarah, the diner waitress who lived next door, her apron still dusted with flour from her late shift. She'd been a rock since my wife passed, always slipping me coffee or a slice of pie when I couldn't afford it. "Henry, you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but firm, her eyes catching the dim light like a beacon. I let her in, and the story spilled out Ethan's toast, Victor's taunts, the forged statement. Her face hardened, not with pity but with resolve. "That's low, even for them," she said, her Texas drawl sharp with disgust. "I know a guy, Tom, works security at Ethan's building. He sees things. I'll get him to talk." Her loyalty was a fifth shock, a lifeline pulling me from the dark, but it couldn't erase the sting of Marcus's silence or Victor's venom. As Sarah left, promising to call Tom, my phone lit up with a text from Gerald Hayes, the rival oilman who'd mocked me at the wedding. "Heard you're swimming in cash, Sullivan. Why's your truck still a junker?" The words were a sixth shock, a public jab that twisted the knife deeper. Gerald, who'd once tried to ruin me, now reveled in my humiliation, his text spreading the lie to his circle of cronies. I imagined them laughing over cigars, toasting my supposed millions while I sat in a condo that smelled of mold. The shame was a physical weight, pressing my chest, but beneath it burned a spark of defiance. I wouldn't let them rewrite me. The seventh shock came an hour later, a voicemail from Marcus, his voice clipped, nervous. "Henry, we need to talk. Ethan's got big plans for you, but you gotta play along. Don't mess this up." "Play along?" The phrase was a slap, confirming his complicity. Marcus, who'd shared beers with me after my wife's funeral, was now a middleman in their scheme, his loyalty bought by Ethan's wealth. My heart cracked wider, the pain of losing a friend sharper than losing money. I stood, pacing the tiny living room, my reflection in the cracked mirror showing a man I barely recognized gray, worn, but not broken. I grabbed a notebook, an old habit from my oilfield days, and started writing. Ethan's words at the wedding, Victor's sneer, the forged statement, Sarah's promise, Tom's potential secrets, Gerald's text, Marcus's betrayal. Each line was a brick, building a case against the lie. My hands steadied as I wrote, the act grounding me. I wasn't just a father betrayed, I was a man with a fight left in him. Sarah's knock came again, urgent. "Tom's on board," she whispered. "He's got footage from the office, Isabella signing papers with your name. He's scared, but he'll help." The eighth shock was this. The truth was within reach, and I had allies. But as I closed the notebook, the weight of what lay ahead settled in. Ethan and Isabella thought they'd buried me in their lie, but I was digging my way out, and the ground was about to shake. The Houston dawn crept through my condo's thin curtains, painting the room in a gray light that felt heavier than the night before. My notebook lay open on the kitchen counter, its pages filled with the jagged truth of Ethan's lie, Victor's taunts, and the forged bank statement that bore my name like a stolen coat. The coffee pot gurgled, spitting bitter steam, but it couldn't wash away the taste of betrayal. $24 million a year, Ethan had claimed. While I scraped by on pennies, my life reduced to a prop in his wedding performance. I stood at the sink, staring at the faucet's slow drip, each drop a reminder of the life I'd built and the son who'd torn it down. My heart wrestled with itself, one half yearning to call Ethan, to hear him say it was all a mistake. The other half knowing he'd chosen Isabella's ambition over my dignity. The fight inside me was a fire, burning low but fierce, and I knew silence was no longer my shelter. The first shock of the morning hit like a fist. A text from Isabella, her words sharp as broken glass. "Keep your mouth shut, old man, or you'll regret it. Nobody cares about your sad little story." Her tone was pure Houston Street, venom dressed in designer heels, meant to shove me back into the shadows. I gripped the phone, my pulse hammering, wanting to fire back, to tell her I wasn't the frail fool she thought. But the father in me, the one who'd once braided Ethan's shoelaces before school, hesitated, torn between rage and the fading hope of saving him. Her threat was a second betrayal, not just a lie but a promise to crush me if I spoke. I saved the message, my fingers steady despite the storm in my chest, and added it to the notebook, each word a brick in the wall I was building against their deceit. Then came the second shock, a call from my old lawyer, Diane Carter, a woman whose voice carried the calm of a West Texas sunset. She'd handled my company's contracts in the glory days, her pen sharper than most men's tongues. "Henry, I heard about the wedding," she said, her tone soft but edged with steel. "I dug into Vantage Holdings. It's a shell, tied to Isabella's family. Your name's on it, but the money's flowing to offshore accounts." My breath caught, the room tilting. Offshore accounts? The scale of their theft, $24 million a year, hit harder now. A third betrayal that wasn't just personal but global. A scheme that used my identity to hide their greed. Diane promised to pull records, to trace the paper trail. Her loyalty was a third shock, a lifeline pulling me toward truth, but it deepened the wound of Ethan's choice to bury me in his lie. I paced the condo, the carpet worn thin under my steps, my mind a tangle of grief and resolve. I saw Ethan at 16, his eyes bright with dreams I'd sworn to fund, and now at 30, his hand on Isabella's, toasting a fortune that never reached me. The pain was a blade, slicing deeper with each memory, but it sharpened my focus. I wouldn't let them erase me. The fourth shock came as I opened my laptop. An email from Gerald Hayes, the rival oilman, forwarded to his entire network, mocking me. "Sullivan's living large, huh? Guess he forgot how to spend his millions." The email was a public flogging, each word a lash, and I imagined Houston's elite snickering over their morning espressos. Gerald's betrayal, a fourth layer, wasn't just personal, it was a spectacle, amplifying my humiliation to keep their lie alive. The fifth shock was a knock, soft but urgent, from Luis, the waiter who'd slipped me the note at the wedding. His eyes darted down the hall, his diner uniform wrinkled from a double shift. "I got something," he whispered, handing me a USB drive. "Security footage from Ethan's office. Isabella signing your name, Victor laughing like it's a game. Tom got it for you, but he's scared they're watching him." My heart lurched, gratitude and fear colliding. Luis's courage, risking his job for a man he barely knew, was a beacon. But the footage was a sixth shock, proof that their scheme wasn't just a lie but a performance, rehearsed and cruel. I thanked him, my voice cracking, and he vanished into the morning haze, leaving me with evidence that could break their world. My phone buzzed again, the sixth shock. A voicemail from Marcus, my old friend, his voice slick with panic. "Henry, you're stirring up trouble you don't understand. Play ball, or you'll lose more than you think." His words were a fifth betrayal, a friend turned pawn, his loyalty sold to Ethan's empire. I replayed the message, each syllable a nail in the coffin of our 30-year friendship. My chest ached, not just for Ethan but for Marcus, who'd once carried my grief and now carried their lie. I wanted to scream, to demand why he'd chosen their side, but the truth was clear. Money had rewritten his heart. Just as it had Ethan's, the seventh shock came as I stepped outside, the Houston air thick with humidity. A graffiti scrawl on my condo's wall read, "Rich Pop's Poor Brain," in red spray paint, Victor's handiwork no doubt. The insult was street crude, a public slap meant to shame me into silence. Neighbors stared, their whispers a chorus of pity and doubt, and I felt my name shrinking, my legacy reduced to a vandal's taunt. The eighth shock followed as I drove to the diner to meet Sarah, my Chevy sputtering past a billboard for Ethan's company, his face beaming next to the words, "Family First." The hypocrisy was a gut punch, a sixth betrayal, his public image built on my stolen identity while I dodged creditors and ate stale bread. At the diner, Sarah slid a coffee across the counter, her eyes fierce with loyalty. "Tom's got more," she said. He found emails in the office trash Isabella to Victor, planning to keep the old man quiet with threats. Her words were a ninth shock, a seventh betrayal, revealing a conspiracy not just to steal, but to silence me with fear. Sarah's hand on mine was steady, her Texas grit a reminder that I wasn't alone, but the weight of their cruelty pressed harder. I saw Ethan's childhood smile, his hand in mine at a county fair, and now his hand signing away my life. The grief was a tidal wave, threatening to drown me, but Sarah's voice pulled me back. "You fight, Henry. You're not their prop." I drove to Diane's office, the USB and notebook in my bag, each a weapon in a war I hadn't chosen. My mind churned, love for Ethan battling the fury of his betrayal, shame wrestling with defiance. I'd built an empire for him, only to be cast as a beggar in his story. But as the Houston skyline loomed, its glass towers glinting like Isabella's eyes, I made a vow. I'd tear down their lie, not with screams, but with proof. The road ahead was a battlefield, but I had Sarah, Luis, Tom, and Diane soldiers in a fight for my name. Their loyalty was a 10th shock, a spark that lit the fire in my chest. Ethan and Isabella thought they'd buried me, but I was rising, and their world would tremble. The Houston morning clung to me like damp cotton as I sat at my kitchen table, the USB drive from Luis, and my notebook anchoring me to a truth that felt both heavy and alive. The coffee I'd brewed tasted like ash, no match for the bitter burn of Ethan's $24 million lie, a fiction that had painted me as a pampered patriarch while I rationed gas to keep my Chevy running. The graffiti on my condo wall, "Rich Pops, Poor Brain," still stung, Victor's crude jab a public scar, but it was Isabella's text, sharp and street rough, that echoed loudest, "Keep your mouth shut, old man." My heart was a fractured thing, split between the son I'd raised and the stranger who'd stolen my name. I wanted to drive to Ethan's mansion, to pound on his door and demand answers. But the man I'd become, hardened by years of oilfield grit, knew better. This wasn't a fight for shouts, it was a war for proof, and I was arming myself. The first shock of the day slammed in with a phone call from Victor, his voice dripping with Houston gutter swagger. "Yo, Grandpa, you still whining about your millions? Get over it, or we'll make sure nobody takes your broke ass seriously." His words were a blade, triple the venom of Isabella's, meant to grind me into dust. I gripped the table, my knuckles pale, torn between hurling the phone and recording his every syllable. The father in me ached, picturing Ethan's boyhood laugh as we fished in Galveston Bay, but that memory clashed with the reality of his betrayal, a fifth layer that cut deeper than the others. Victor's threat was a second shock, a reminder that their scheme wasn't just theft, but a campaign to erase my voice. I hit record, my thumb steady, and let him spew, each word a nail in their coffin. The third shock came as I checked my mailbox, finding a letter from my old bank, stamped with a logo I'd trusted for decades. It wasn't a bill, but a notice. An account in my name, opened without my consent, linked to Vantage Holdings with a balance of $24 million. The signature was mine, but the loops were wrong, a forgery so bold it mocked my existence. My breath hitched, the room shrinking, as I realized this wasn't just Ethan and Isabella, it was a syndicate, a sixth betrayal involving bankers who'd once shaken my hand at company galas. My mind churned, love for Ethan warring with a fury so raw it threatened to swallow me. I'd sold my rigs for him, only to be reduced to a signature on their scam. A knock at the door brought the fourth shock. Clara, my former assistant, her eyes fierce with loyalty but shadowed with fear. She held a folder, her hands trembling. "Henry, I went through old files at the office," she whispered. "Found a memo from Marcus to Ethan, dated last year, planning to leverage your name for tax breaks. Marcus, my friend of 30 years, had penned my betrayal, a seventh layer that felt like a bullet." Clara's voice cracked as she added, "I also found a photo Isabella and a banker at a yacht party, toasting with your name on a contract." The image burned in my mind, an eighth shock, proof of their celebration over my ruin. Clara's loyalty was a lifeline, but it deepened the wound of Marcus's treachery, his laughter at my wife's funeral, now a hollow echo. I paced the condo, the floor creaking under my weight, my heart a battlefield of grief and defiance. I saw Ethan at 20, his hand on my shoulder as I signed over my last asset to fund his startup. Now that hand signed my name to lies, while Isabella and Victor laughed, and Marcus profited. The pain was a storm, each wave crashing with the weight of a life betrayed. But Clara's folder and Luis's USB were weapons, and I wasn't alone. The fifth shock came as my phone lit up with a text from Tom, the security guard. "Found more footage," he wrote. "Isabella bribing a bank teller. Your name on the form. I'm risking everything, Henry." His courage was a ninth shock, a spark in the dark, but it underscored the danger we all faced. a ninth betrayal from a system that let my name be stolen. The sixth shock was a voicemail from Gerald Hayes, his rival's sneer now a public crusade. "Sullivan, your sob story's spreading. Keep it up, and you'll be a laughingstock from here to Dallas." His words, forwarded to Houston's elite, were a 10th betrayal, turning my pain into gossip for their country clubs. I imagined their smirks over martinis, my legacy a punchline. The shame was a physical weight, pressing my chest, but beneath it burned a fire I hadn't felt since my oil field days. I wouldn't let them rewrite me. The seventh shock came as I drove to Diane's office, passing a newsstand where a tabloid screamed, "Oil Baron's dad begs for scraps." The lie had gone public, an 11th betrayal, orchestrated by Isabella to bury me in ridicule before I could fight back. At Diane's office, a cramped space smelling of paper and determination, the 8th shock landed. She slid a document across her desk, a tax filing, signed by Marcus, claiming me as Ethan's dependent with $24 million in support. The lie was official, filed with the IRS, a 12th betrayal that turned my name into a tax shelter. Diane's eyes met mine, steady but kind. "We've got them, Henry," she said, "but they'll fight dirty." Her loyalty was a 10th shock, a beacon in the storm, but it couldn't erase the pain of Marcus's signature, a friend who'd traded my trust for profit. I wanted to scream, to demand why Ethan had let this happen, but the truth was clear. He'd chosen wealth over me, and Marcus had followed. The 9th shock came as Sarah called, her voice urgent. "Henry, I overheard Victor at the diner bragging to a suit about keeping the old man in line with fake hospital bills." The revelation was a 13th betrayal, a plan to paint me as frail, even institutionalized, to silence my fight. Sarah's Texas grit shone through, her loyalty a shield, but the weight of their cruelty threatened to break me. I saw Ethan's boyish grin, his hand in mine at a rodeo, now replaced by a man who'd let Isabella and Victor weaponize my name. The grief was a tidal wave, but the fire in my chest burned hotter. I added Sarah's words to the notebook, each line a vow. I'd fight, not for revenge, but for my name. Diane, Clara, Luis, Tom, and Sarah were my army, and the Houston skyline, gleaming like Isabella's ambition, was about to see a reckoning. The Houston sun climbed high, its heat pressing through the window of Diane's office, where the weight of her tax filing discovery, $24 million, claimed as my support sat like a stone on my chest. My notebook, now thick with the jagged edges of truth, held Victor's threats, Marcus's memo, and the footage of Isabella forging my name. Each piece was a weapon, but the war inside me raged fiercer. The father who'd carried Ethan through storms now faced a son who'd built a hurricane to drown me. The coffee Diane poured me tasted like regret, no match for the grief of a life betrayed. I wanted to believe Ethan was trapped, a pawn in Isabella's game, but the evidence screamed otherwise. My heart was a fractured mirror, reflecting love and fury, and I knew this fight would demand more than proof, it would demand my soul. The first shock of the day hit like a freight train. A call from Isabella, her voice pure Houston street venom. "Listen up, you washed up. Has been," she hissed. "Keep digging, and we'll bury you so deep even your pathetic allies won't find you." Her words, triple the cruelty of Victor's, were a blade meant to carve my resolve to nothing. I gripped the desk, my pulse a war drum, torn between shouting back and letting her dig her own grave. The father in me, who'd once kissed Ethan's forehead after nightmares, begged for silence, hoping for a shred of redemption. But her threat was a 14th betrayal, a vow to destroy not just my name, but my fight. I recorded every word, my hand steady, each syllable a rope tightening around their lie. The second shock came as Diane's phone buzzed with an email from a whistleblower, a junior accountant named Rachel, who'd worked under Marcus. Her message was frantic. I found a ledger in Vantage Holdings server, labeled Sullivan Care, funneling $24 million to a Cayman Islands account. Marcus signed off, but Isabella gave the orders. My breath stopped, the room narrowing to a pinprick. A 15th betrayal, not just from Ethan and Marcus, but from a system that let my name be a currency for their greed. Rachel's courage, risking her career, was a third shock, a spark of hope, but it deepened the wound of Marcus's complicity, his signature, a knife in a friendship I'd thought unbreakable. I stepped outside, the Houston air thick with diesel and despair, my mind a battlefield. I saw Ethan at 12, his hands sticky with cotton candy at the state fair, my laughter echoing his. Now those hands signed ledgers that stole my life, while Isabella orchestrated and Marcus nodded. The pain was a wildfire, burning through every memory. but it forged a steel in me I hadn't felt since my oil field days. The fourth shock hit as my phone lit up with a text from Gerald Hayes. His words, a public execution. Sullivan's crying poor now? Tell that to his millions. Forwarded to Houston's elite, it was a 16th betrayal. A lie meant to paint me as a fraud while they sipped champagne. The shame was a chain, but defiance was a hammer, and I was breaking free. The fifth shock came as Sarah met me at a corner deli. Her apron swapped for a denim jacket, her eyes blazing with Texas grit. Tom got more, she said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Bank records from a safe in Ethan's office, your name, their withdrawals, millions to luxury cars and private jets. Her voice shook, not with fear, but with fury for me. The records were a sixth shock, a 17th betrayal. Proof that Ethan and Isabella lived like kings while I counted pennies for bread. Sarah's loyalty was a seventh shock, a shield against the storm, but it couldn't erase the image of Ethan's hand signing my ruin, his boyhood promises now ash. The sixth shock was a voicemail from Marcus, his voice trembling, no longer slick. Henry, you're killing me here. Just say you got the money, and this goes away. His plea was an 18th betrayal, a friend begging me to wear his lie to save his skin. I replayed it, each word a nail in the coffin of our past, my chest aching for the man who'd stood by me at my wife's grave. I wanted to forgive him, to believe he was coerced, but the truth was colder. He'd chosen Ethan's empire over me. The seventh shock came as I drove past a Houston television station, a news ticker flashing, oil tycoon's father claims poverty amid millions. The lie had hit the airwaves, a 19th betrayal, Isabella's handiwork to drown my truth in spectacle. My legacy was now a headline, mocked by strangers in sports bars and boardrooms. The eighth shock landed at the deli when Luis slipped in, his face pale, his hands clutching a burner phone. They're watching me, Henry, he whispered. Victor threatened to fire my brother if I talk. But I got audio Isabella telling a lawyer to make Sullivan look senile. The audio was a ninth shock, a 20th betrayal, a plan to strip my sanity alongside my name. Luis's courage, risking his family's livelihood, was a 10th shock, a light in the dark, but it underscored the danger we faced. I thanked him, my voice breaking, and he vanished into the lunch crowd, leaving me with a weapon that could shatter their world. The ninth shock came as Diane called me back to her office. Her desk now, a war room of papers and resolve. She held up a photo from Rachel, Ethan, Isabella, and a banker at a private club, laughing over a contract with my forged signature. The image was an 11th shock, a 21st betrayal, their joy a dagger in my heart. Diane's eyes were steady, her voice a vow. We're building a case, Henry. They can't outrun this. Her loyalty was a 12th shock, a lifeline, but it couldn't erase the pain of Ethan's laughter, a son who'd traded my love for millions. My mind spun, love battling fury, grief clashing with resolve. I saw Ethan's first steps, my hands guiding him, now guiding a pen to steal my life. The pain was a tidal wave, but I was no longer drowning. Are you enjoying the story so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just drop a quick comment below to share how you feel. It only takes a few seconds, but your words give me the motivation and inspiration to make every chapter more thrilling and engaging. Go ahead, let me know what's on your mind. And now, let's dive back into the story. I returned to my condo, the notebook heavier with each new line. Victor's call, Rachel's ledger, Sarah's records, Luis's audio, Diane's photo. Each was a vow to reclaim my name. The Houston skyline glared, its towers a mirror of Isabella's ambition, but I was no longer a shadow. Sarah, Luis, Tom, Rachel, and Diane were my army. Their courage, a fire matching mine. Ethan and Marcus thought they'd buried me, but I was rising, and their empire would quake. The Houston dusk settled like a bruise, its heavy air seeping through my condo's cracked window as I clutched the notebook now brimming with evidence. Rachel's ledger, Sarah's bank records, Luis's audio, Diane's photo of Ethan and Isabella laughing over my forged signature. The weight of their $24 million lie pressed against my ribs, a theft not just of money but of my name, my legacy, my very breath. I stood at the counter, the sink dripping like a metronome of betrayal, my heart torn between the son I'd raised and the man who'd buried me in his ambition. The memory of Ethan's small hand in mine at a 4th of July barbecue flickered, then faded against the reality of his betrayal, a 20-second layer that cut deeper than any blade. I wanted to call him, to beg for a truth that could mend us. But the fire in my chest burned hotter, demanding justice over sentiment. This was no longer about saving Ethan, it was about saving myself. The first shock of the evening slammed in with a knock, loud and brazen, like a fist on steel. It was Victor, his hedge fund swagger dripping with Houston street venom. "Yo, you senile old fool," he snarled, his breath sour with bourbon. "Keep flapping your gums and we'll make sure you're drooling in a home by next week." His words, triple the cruelty of Isabella's, were a sledgehammer meant to crush my fight. I gripped the door frame, my pulse a wildfire, torn between slamming the door and dragging him inside to face me. The father in me, who'd once carried Ethan on my shoulders, ached for a world where this wasn't my reality. But Victor's threat was a 23rd betrayal, a vow to lock me away to protect their scam. I hit record on my phone, hidden in my pocket, each word a chain I'd used to bind them. The second shock came as my phone buzzed with an email from Rachel, her tone frantic but resolute. "Henry, I hacked into an old server, found a contract with your name, selling a penthouse to Vantage Holdings. Marcus approved it, but Ethan signed." My heart stopped, the room tilting. A penthouse? The lie wasn't just financial, it was a 24th betrayal, using my name to flip properties while I lived in a condo with peeling paint. Rachel's bravery, risking jail for me, was a third shock. A beacon in the dark, but it deepened the wound of Ethan's choice. A son who'd turned my legacy into a real estate game. I stepped onto the balcony, the Houston skyline glittering like a false promise, my mind a storm of grief and steel. I saw Ethan at 18, his eyes wide as I handed him the keys to his first car, my pride a warmth I'd carried for years. Now that warmth was ash, replaced by a son who sold my name for millions. The pain was a hurricane, tearing through every memory, but it sharpened my resolve. The fourth shock hit as my phone lit up with a text from Gerald Hayes, his words a public guillotine. "Sullivan's playing victim now?" His millions say otherwise. Forwarded to Houston's elite, it was a 25th betrayal. A lie meant to paint me as a liar while they dined on caviar. The shame was a noose, but I was cutting it loose. The fifth shock came, as Clara called, her voice shaking with urgency. "Henry, I found a burner phone in Ethan's office, trash texts between Isabella and a lawyer, planning to file a guardianship claim against you." The revelation was a 26th betrayal, a plan to strip my freedom alongside my name. Clara's loyalty, risking her safety to dig through their secrets, was a sixth shock, a lifeline, but it couldn't erase the image of Isabella plotting to cage me. I wanted to scream, to demand why Ethan let her wield my life like a weapon. But the truth was clear. He'd chosen her empire over me. The sixth shock was a voicemail from Marcus, his voice cracking like thin ice. "Henry, you're ruining everything. Just sign a statement saying you're confused, and we'll fix this." His plea was a 27th betrayal, a friend begging me to wear their lie to save his neck. I replayed it, each word a splinter in the wreckage of our friendship, my chest aching for the man who'd toasted my successes. The seventh shock came as I turned on the television, a local news anchor smirking, "Oil baron's father claims poverty despite millions in support." The story, fed by Isabella, was a 28th betrayal, a public crucifixion to drown my truth in laughter. My legacy was now a punchline, mocked in every bar from Houston to Austin. The eighth shock landed as Tom slipped into my condo, his security badge glinting under the dim light. "Henry, I got a recording Victor bribing a judge to fast-track your guardianship case." His hands shook, his voice low with fear, but his courage was a ninth shock, a light in the storm. The recording was a 29th betrayal, proof that their scheme reached into the courts, a system I'd once trusted. Tom's risk, endangering his job and safety, was a 10th shock, but it underscored the danger we faced, a net closing around us all. The 9th shock came as Sarah arrived, her denim jacket stained with coffee, her eyes fierce with Texas fire. "I found a witness," she said. A maid, Elena, who overheard Isabella and Ethan laughing about milking the old man for tax breaks. Elena's testimony was an 11th shock, a 30th betrayal, their laughter a dagger in my heart. Sarah's loyalty, rallying strangers to my cause, was a 12th shock, a shield against their cruelty, but it couldn't erase the pain of Ethan's joy in my ruin. My mind spun, love for Ethan clashing with a fury so raw it threatened to break me. I saw him at 25, his hand on mine as we signed his first deal, now signing my name to a lie. The grief was a tidal wave, but I was learning to swim. I drove to a quiet diner, the notebook and recordings in my bag, each a vow to reclaim my name. The Houston night hummed with traffic, its lights a mirror of Isabella's ambition, but I was no longer her shadow. Sarah, Luis, Tom, Tom, Clara, Rachel, and Diane were my army, their courage a fire matching mine. Ethan and Marcus thought they'd silence me, but I was rising, and their empire was cracking. The Houston night wrapped around me like a heavy coat, its humidity clinging to my skin as I sat in the diner's dim glow, the notebook, now a tome of betrayal. Elena's testimony, Tom's recording of Victor's bribe, Clara's burner phone texts, Rachel's penthouse contract, and Diane's relentless pursuit of truth. The weight of Ethan's $24 million lie pressed harder, a theft that turned my name into a currency for his empire while I lived on borrowed time and stale bread. My heart was a battlefield, torn between the boy I'd taught to dream and the man who'd sold my dreams for profit. I saw Ethan at 15, his eyes bright with plans we'd sketched on napkins, now blurred by the reality of his 31st betrayal, a son who'd let Isabella and her allies strip me bare. I wanted to believe he was lost, not cruel, but the evidence was a cold wind, and I was done seeking shelter. This fight was for my name, and I was ready to burn their stage to ash. The first shock of the night hit like a gunshot, a pounding on my condo door, followed by Gerald Hayes' voice, thick with Houston barroom grit. "You pathetic old loser," he slurred, "crying about your millions. We'll make sure you're a joke from here to Galveston." His words, triple the venom of Victor's, were a sledgehammer meant to shatter my resolve. I stood frozen, my pulse a thunderstorm, torn between flinging the door open to face him and letting his rant fuel my fight. The father in me, who'd once cheered Ethan's first home run, ached for a world where loyalty held, but Gerald's taunt was a 30-second betrayal, a public flogging to keep their lie alive. I pressed record on my phone, hidden in my sleeve, each word a brick in the wall I'd build against them. The second shock came as my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a grainy photo attached. Me, slumped in my Chevy, captioned, "Sullivan's millions can't buy a new ride." The image, spread across Houston's gossip blogs, was a 33rd betrayal. Isabella's handiwork to paint me as a fraud while she wore diamonds bought with my name. My breath caught, the shame, a lead weight, but it stoked the fire in my chest. The third shock followed as Diane called, her voice steady but urgent. "Henry, I got a tip from a bank insider, Paul, who saw Ethan forge your signature on a loan for a private jet. He's willing to testify." Paul's courage, risking his career, was a fourth shock, a beacon in the dark, but it deepened the wound of Ethan's betrayal, a 34th layer, a son who'd flown above my ruin on wings I'd funded. I paced the condo, the floorboards groaning like my heart, my mind a storm of grief and steel. I saw Ethan at 22, his hand shaking as he signed his first contract, my pride a warmth I'd carried through lean years. Now that warmth was cinders, replaced by a man who'd mortgaged my name for jets and penthouses. The pain was a tornado, ripping through every memory, but it sharpened my focus. The fifth shock hit as Sarah slipped in, her eyes blazing with Texas fury. "Elena found a diary in Isabella's office," she whispered, handing me a photocopy. "It details how they plan to break the old man with fake medical reports." The diary was a sixth shock, a 35th betrayal, proof that Isabella's cruelty wasn't just ambition but a vendetta. Sarah's loyalty, rallying allies like Elena, was a seventh shock, a shield, but it couldn't erase the image of Ethan nodding to her plan. The sixth shock was a voicemail from Marcus, his voice a broken whisper. "Henry, you're tearing us apart. Just say you got the money, and I'll make it right." His plea was a 36th betrayal, a friend offering a bribe to wear their lie. I replayed it, each word a splinter in the wreckage of our friendship, my chest aching for the man who'd toasted my successes. I wanted to forgive him, to believe he was trapped, but the truth was ice. He'd chosen Ethan's wealth over me. The seventh shock came as I opened my laptop, finding a viral post on a Houston forum. "Sullivan's a fraud, begging while banking millions." The lie, seated by Victor, was a 37th betrayal, a digital crucifixion to drown my truth in clicks. My legacy was now a meme, laughed at in coffee shops and boardrooms. The eighth shock landed as Tom called, his voice shaking. "Henry, I got a photo from a security cam Isabella paying off a doctor to fake your dementia diagnosis." The image was a ninth shock, a 38th betrayal, proof that their scheme reached into medicine, a system I'd trusted to heal. Tom's courage, risking his life, was a 10th shock, but it underscored the danger closing in. The ninth shock came as Rachel texted, her words frantic. "Found a wire transfer memo, your name, $24 million to a Swiss account, signed by Ethan and a banker named Vince." The memo was an 11th shock, a 39th betrayal, their greed, a global web. Rachel's bravery was a 12th shock, a light in the storm, but it deepened the pain of Ethan's signature, a son who'd sold my name for millions. I drove to Diane's office, the notebook and recordings in my bag, each a vow to reclaim my soul. The Houston streets buzzed with neon, their glow a mirror of Isabella's ambition, but I was no longer her pawn. The 10th shock came as Clara met me at the office, her hands clutching a USB drive. I recorded a call Victor telling a reporter to bury Sullivan's story with lies. The recording was a 13th shock, a 40th betrayal, their plan to silence me through the press. Clara's loyalty, risking everything, was a 14th shock, but it couldn't erase the pain of Ethan's complicity, his boyhood dreams now a nightmare. My mind spun, love for Ethan battling a fury so raw it threatened to consume me. I saw him at 30, his hand in mine as we toasted his first million, now signing my name to a lie. The grief was a tidal wave, but I was learning to stand. Diane's office smelled of ink and resolve, her desk a war room of truth. Sarah, Luis, Tom, Clara, Rachel, Elena, and Paul were my army. Their courage a fire matching mine. Ethan, Isabella, Victor, Marcus, Gerald, and their allies thought they'd crushed me, but I was rising, and their empire was trembling. The Houston dawn clawed through the diner's greasy windows, casting shadows across my notebook, now a fortress of truth. Clara's recording of Victor's press manipulation, Elena's diary exposing Isabella's vendetta, Tom's photo of her bribing a doctor, Rachel's wire transfer memo, and Paul's testimony about Ethan's forged jet loan. The weight of their $24 million lie was a chain around my heart, a theft that turned my name into a tool for their empire while I scraped by on expired dreams and a leaking roof. My mind was a storm, torn between the son I'd carried through life's fires and the man who'd set me ablaze with betrayal. I saw Ethan at 17, his grin wide as we rebuilt a carburetor in the garage, now replaced by a stranger who'd sold my name for jets and penthouses. The grief was a riptide, pulling me under, but the fire in my chest burned brighter, a vow to reclaim my soul. I wasn't just fighting for justice, I was fighting to be seen. The first shock of the morning hit like a thunderclap, a text from Victor, his Houston street venom sharper than ever. "Keep crying, you broke-ass relic," he spat. "We'll make sure you're locked in a loony bin before you blink." His words, triple the cruelty of Gerald's, were a machete meant to hack my fight to pieces. I gripped my coffee mug, the ceramic hot against my palm, torn between smashing it and letting his threat fuel my resolve. The father in me, who'd once patched Ethan's scraped knees, ached for a world where loyalty wasn't a lie, but Victor's words were a 41st betrayal, a vow to strip my sanity to save their scam. I saved the text, my fingers steady, each letter a link in the chain I'd used to bind them. The second shock came as Diane's phone pinged with a fax from Paul, the bank insider. "Found a deposit slip," he wrote. $24 million to a Bahamas account. Your name. Signed by Isabella's lawyer, Frank. My breath caught, the diner's air thick with grease and betrayal. A 42nd betrayal. Not just Ethan, but a lawyer I'd never met, turning my name into a passport for their greed. Paul's courage, risking his family's safety, was a third shock, a flicker of light. But it deepened the wound of Ethan's complicity, a son who'd let my legacy fund their island escapes. I stepped outside, the Houston morning heavy with exhaust and heat, my heart a battlefield of love and rage. I saw Ethan at 28, his hand on mine as we toasted his first merger, now signing my name to offshore accounts. The pain was a wildfire, consuming every memory, but it forged a steel resolve. The fourth shock hit as my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Gerald Hayes, his voice a drunken sneer. "Sullivan, your pity party's trending. Keep it up, and you'll be the city's biggest joke." Forwarded to Houston's elite, it was a 43rd betrayal, a lie meant to bury my truth in laughter. The shame was a boulder, but I was learning to push back. The fifth shock came as Sarah met me at a gas station, her eyes blazing with Texas grit. "Elena got a letter," she said, handing me a crumpled page. "Isabella to a senator, asking to handle Sullivan with a smear campaign." The letter was a sixth shock, a 44th betrayal, proof that their scheme reached into politics, a system I'd once lobbied for oil rights. Sarah's loyalty, rallying strangers like Elena, was a seventh shock, a shield, but it couldn't erase the image of Ethan's silence as Isabella pulled strings. The sixth shock was a call from Rachel, her voice trembling. "I found a deleted email, Marcus, to Ethan, planning to retire you to a care home to secure the funds." The email was an eighth shock, a 45th betrayal, a friend plotting to cage me for profit. I replayed the call. each word a splinter in our 30-year friendship, my chest aching for the man who'd shared my victories. I wanted to believe he was coerced, but the truth was stone. He'd chosen their empire over me. The seventh shock came as I passed a Houston billboard, Ethan's face beaming beside Legacy of Care, a 46th betrayal. His public lie now, a citywide mockery while I dodged eviction notices. The eighth shock landed as Luis slipped into the gas station, his hands shaking with a microchip. "From Ethan's office," he whispered. "A tracker on your Chevy, placed by Victor's guy." The chip was a ninth shock, a 47th betrayal, proof they were stalking me to silence my fight. Luis's courage, risking his life, was a 10th shock, but it underscored the danger tightening around us. The ninth shock came as Clara texted, "Found a fake will in Isabella's safe, your name, leaving everything to Vantage Holdings." The will was an 11th shock, a 48th betrayal, their plan to steal even my death. Clara's bravery was a 12th shock, a lifeline, but it couldn't erase the pain of Ethan's complicity, a son who'd buried me alive. The 10th shock was a knock at Diane's office, where Tom waited, his security badge dull in the fluorescent light. "I got a video," he said. "Victor paying a hacker to plant fake hospital records online." The video was a 13th shock, a 49th betrayal, their scheme now digital warfare. Tom's loyalty, risking everything, was a 14th shock, but it deepened the wound of Ethan's silence. My mind spun, love for Ethan clashing with a fury so raw it threatened to break me. I saw him at 32, his hand in mine as we celebrated his IPO, now signing my name to a grave. The grief was a tsunami, but I was learning to stand. Diane's office smelled of coffee and justice, her desk a war room of truth. She laid out the plan. Paul's testimony, Elena's letter, Clara's will, Rachel's email, Tom's video, Luis's tracker. Each was a vow to reclaim my name. The Houston skyline loomed, its towers a mirror of Isabella's ambition, but I was no longer her shadow. Sarah, Luis, Tom, Clara, Rachel, Elena, Paul, and Diane were my army, their courage a fire matching mine. Ethan, Isabella, Victor, Marcus, Gerald, and their allies thought they'd erased me, but I was rising, and their empire was crumbling. The Houston morning broke with a heat that pressed against my condo's walls, the air thick with the scent of asphalt and defiance. My notebook, now a battle-scarred ledger of truth, held Paul's deposit slip, Elena's letter to a senator, Clara's fake will, Tom's video of Victor's hacker, Rachel's Swiss account memo, and Diane's unwavering resolve. The weight of Ethan's $24 million lie was a noose around my heart, a theft that turned my name into a pawn for their empire while I lived on borrowed hope and a flickering torchlight. My mind was a crucible, forging love for Ethan against the molten fury of his betrayal. I saw him at 20, his laugh echoing as we watched fireworks over the Gulf, now drowned by the reality of his 49th betrayal, a son who'd let Isabella and her allies chain my legacy to their greed. I wanted to believe he was lost, not cruel, but the evidence was a blade, and I was done bleeding. This fight was for my name, and I was ready to let the world hear my voice. The first shock of the day crashed in like a wrecking ball, a call from Isabella, her voice, a Houston street snarl. "You're done, you washed up nobody," she spat. "Keep talking, and we'll make sure you're begging on the street by sundown." Her words, triple the venom of Victor's, were a guillotine meant to sever my fight. I gripped the phone, my pulse a war cry, torn between cursing her back and letting her threats fuel my fire. The father in me, who'd once tucked Ethan into bed with stories of oilfield triumphs, ached for a world where trust wasn't a lie, but Isabella's taunt was a 50th betrayal, a vow to ruin me to protect their scam. I recorded every syllable, my hand steady, each word a link in the chain I'd used to drag them down. The second shock came as Diane's email pinged with a message from a new ally, Maria, a former receptionist at Ethan's firm. "I saw Isabella shred documents with your name," she wrote, "but I kept copies loan agreements for a yacht, signed in your name." My breath stopped, the room shrinking to a pinprick. A 51st betrayal, not just Ethan, but Isabella, turning my name into a yacht's title while I dodged repo men. Maria's courage, risking her safety, was a third shock, a spark in the dark, but it deepened the wound of Ethan's choice, a son who'd sailed my legacy into their sunset. I stepped into the Houston heat, the city's pulse heavy with traffic and betrayal, my heart a battlefield of love and rage. I saw Ethan at 25, his hand gripping mine as we closed his first deal, now forging my name for yachts and jets. The pain was a maelstrom, shredding every memory, but it sharpened my resolve. The fourth shock hit as my phone buzzed with a text from Gerald Hayes, his words a public execution. Sullivan's whining again? His millions must be lonely. Forwarded to Houston's elite, it was a 50-second betrayal, a lie meant to drown my truth in their laughter. The shame was a tidal wave, but I was learning to swim. The fifth shock came as Sarah met me at a downtown library, her eyes fierce with Texas grit. "Maria got a recording," she said, slipping me a USB drive. Ethan telling a board member to keep the old man quiet with a fake lawsuit. The recording was a sixth shock, a 53rd betrayal. Proof that Ethan's cruelty wasn't just passive, but a calculated strike. Sarah's loyalty, rallying allies like Maria, was a seventh shock, a shield, but it couldn't erase the image of Ethan plotting my silence. The sixth shock was a voicemail from Marcus, his voice a trembling wreck. "Henry, you're killing us. Sign a paper saying you're mistaken, and we'll pay your bills." His offer was a 54th betrayal, a friend bartering my truth for his survival. I replayed it, each word a shard in the ruins of our friendship, my chest aching for the man who'd shared my dreams. I wanted to believe he was trapped, but the truth was granite. He'd chosen their empire over me. The seventh shock came as I passed a Houston newsstand, a tabloid screaming, "Sullivan's lies exposed, millions squandered." The story, planted by Victor, was a 55th betrayal, a public crucifixion to bury my fight in ridicule. My legacy was now a headline, mocked in every diner from Houston to San Antonio. The eighth shock landed as Tom called, his voice low with fear. I found a ledger in Ethan's Safe Your Name, millions to a shell company, signed by Isabella's cousin Leo. The ledger was a ninth shock, a 56th betrayal, their scheme now a family affair. Tom's courage, risking his life, was a 10th shock, but it underscored the danger tightening around us. The ninth shock came as Rachel texted, "Found a video call Isabella and Frank planning to neutralize Sullivan with a fake tax audit." The video was an 11th shock, a 57th betrayal, their plan to weaponize the IRS against me. Rachel's bravery was a 12th shock, a light in the storm, but it deepened the pain of Ethan's complicity, a son who'd let my name be a target. The 10th shock was a knock at the library, where Clara waited, her hands clutching a crumpled note. "From Elena," she said. "Isabella paid a journalist to plant stories about your mental decline." The note was a 13th shock, a 58th betrayal, their scheme now a media war. Clara's loyalty was a 14th shock, but it couldn't erase the pain of Ethan's silence, his boyhood promises now a lie. My mind spun, love for Ethan battling a fury so raw it threatened to consume me. I saw him at 30, his hand in mine as we celebrated his first IPO, now signing my name to my ruin. The grief was a hurricane, but I was learning to stand. Diane's office smelled of paper and justice, her desk, a war room of truth. She laid out the plan, Maria's documents, Sarah's recording, Tom's ledger, Rachel's video, Clara's note, Paul's testimony, Elena's letter. Each was a vow to reclaim my name. The Houston skyline glared, its towers a mirror of Isabella's ambition, but I was no longer her shadow. Sarah, Luis, Tom, Clara, Rachel, Elena, Paul, Maria, and Diane were my chorus, their courage a fire matching mine. Ethan, Isabella, Victor, Marcus, Gerald, Frank, and Leo thought they'd silenced me, but I was rising, and their empire was falling. The Houston midday sun burned through the library's dusty windows, casting jagged light across my notebook, now a war-torn chronicle of truth. Maria's yacht loan documents, Sarah's recording of Ethan's fake lawsuit, Tom's ledger of shell company transfers, Rachel's video of Isabella's tax audit scheme, Clara's note on the smear campaign, Paul's jet loan testimony, and Elena's letter exposing political strings. The weight of Ethan's $24 million lie was a vice around my heart, a theft that turned my name into a currency for their empire while I lived on borrowed time and a flickering hope. My mind was a furnace, forging love for Ethan against the searing rage of his betrayal. I saw him at 21, his voice cracking with gratitude as I funded his college, now silenced by the reality of his 58th betrayal, a son who'd let Isabella and her allies chain my legacy to their greed. I wanted to believe he was trapped, not heartless, but the evidence was a storm, and I was done seeking shelter. This fight was for my soul, and I was ready to let the world see my stand. The first shock of the day crashed in like a tidal wave, a banging on the library door, followed by Victor's voice, thick with Houston street venom. "You're finished. You broke down nobody," he snarled, his words triple the cruelty of Isabella's. A wrecking ball meant to crush my fight. Keep yapping, and we'll make sure you're eating dog food in a gutter. I gripped the table, my pulse a war drum, torn between storming out to face him and letting his threat fuel my fire. The father in me, who'd once taught Ethan to cast a fishing line, ached for a world where loyalty wasn't a myth. But Victor's taunt was a 59th betrayal, a vow to destroy my dignity to protect their scam. I hit record on my phone, tucked in my pocket, each word a stone I'd use to topple their empire. The second shock came as Diane's phone buzzed with a message from a new ally, Carla, a janitor at Ethan's firm. I found a hidden safe, she wrote, with a contract, your name, a Miami condo sold to Vantage Holdings, signed by Ethan's CFO, Greg. My breath stopped, the library's air thick with betrayal. A 60th betrayal, not just Ethan, but his inner circle, turning my name into a real estate pawn while I fought off foreclosure. Carla's courage, risking her job, was a third shock. A spark in the dark, but it deepened the wound of Ethan's choice, a son who'd built his empire on my ruin. I stepped into the Houston heat, the city's pulse heavy with horns and betrayal, my heart a battlefield of love and fury. I saw Ethan at 27, his hand on mine as we celebrated his first oil deal, now forging my name for condos and jets. The pain was a cyclone, shredding every memory, but it sharpened my resolve. The fourth shock hit as my phone lit up with a text from Gerald Hayes. His words, a public guillotine. Sullivan's begging now? His millions must be allergic to him. Forwarded to Houston's elite, it was a 61st betrayal. A lie meant to drown my truth in their smirks. The shame was a mountain, but I was climbing it. The fifth shock came as Sarah met me at a corner bar, her eyes blazing with Texas grit. Carla got a photo, she said, handing me a printout. Isabella bribing a city official to block your credit. The photo was a sixth shock, a 60-second betrayal, proof that their scheme reached into City Hall, a system I'd once trusted. Sarah's loyalty, rallying allies like Carla, was a seventh shock, a shield, but it couldn't erase the image of Ethan's silence as Isabella pulled strings. The sixth shock was a voicemail from Marcus, his voice a shattered whisper. Henry, you're breaking me. Sign a release, and we'll clear your debts. His offer was a 63rd betrayal, a friend trading my truth for his survival. I replayed it, each word a nail in the coffin of our past, my chest aching for the man who'd shared my triumphs. I wanted to believe he was coerced, but the truth was iron. He'd chosen their empire over me. The seventh shock came as I passed a Houston television truck, a reporter shouting, Sullivan's scam exposed, millions hidden. The story, planted by Isabella, was a 64th betrayal, a public execution to bury my fight in ridicule. My legacy was now a soundbite, mocked in every bar from Houston to Dallas. The eighth shock landed as Tom texted, his voice trembling. Found a memo, Ethan to Greg, planning to frame you for tax evasion. The memo was a ninth shock, a 65th betrayal, their scheme now a legal trap. Tom's courage, risking his life, was a 10th shock, but it underscored the danger closing in. The ninth shock came as Rachel called, found a hacked email Isabella to a PI, hiring him to tail you. The email was an 11th shock, a 66th betrayal, their plan to stalk my every move. Rachel's bravery was a 12th shock, a light in the storm, but it deepened the pain of Ethan's complicity, a son who'd let my name be a target. The 10th shock was a knock at the bar, where Luis waited, his hands clutching a flash drive. From Carla, he said, a recording Victor telling a lawyer to forge your signature on a trust fund. The recording was a 13th shock, a 67th betrayal, their scheme now a legal labyrinth. Luis's courage was a 14th shock, but it couldn't erase the pain of Ethan's silence, his boyhood dreams now a nightmare. My mind spun, love for Ethan, battling a fury so raw it threatened to consume me. I saw him at 31, his hand in mine as we toasted his first billion, now signing my name to my ruin. The grief was a tsunami, but I was learning to stand. Diane's office smelled of ink and justice, her desk a war room of truth. She laid out the plan, Carla's contract, Sarah's photo, Tom's memo, Rachel's email, Luis's recording, Paul's testimony, Elena's letter, Clara's note. Each was a vow to reclaim my name. The Houston skyline glared, its towers a mirror of Isabella's ambition, but I was no longer her shadow. Sarah, Luis, Tom, Clara, Rachel, Elena, Paul, Maria, Carla, and Diane were my army, their courage a fire matching mine. Ethan, Isabella, Victor, Marcus, Gerald, Frank, Leo, and Greg, Thought they'd erased me, but I was rising, and their empire was collapsing. The Houston noon sun blazed through the courthouse windows, casting stark shadows across my notebook, now a sacred relic of truth. Carla's Miami condo contract, Sarah's photo of Isabella's bribery, Tom's memo framing me for tax evasion, Rachel's email of the PI tailing me, Luis's recording of Victor's trust fund forgery, Paul's jet loan testimony, Elena's letter to the senator, Maria's yacht documents, and Clara's note on the smear campaign. The weight of Ethan's $24 million lie was a blade in my chest, a theft that turned my name into a currency for their empire while I lived on borrowed faith and a creaking chair. My heart was a crucible, melting love for Ethan against the molten fury of his betrayal. I saw him at 23, his eyes bright as we grilled steaks on the back porch, now darkened by the reality of his 67th betrayal. A son who'd let Isabella and her allies chain my legacy to their greed. I wanted to believe he was lost, not cruel, but the evidence was a firestorm, and I was done burning. This fight was for my soul, and the courtroom would hear my truth. The first shock of the day roared in like a hurricane. A text from Gerald Hayes, his Houston street venom thicker than ever. "You're toast, you washed-up berm," he sneered. "We'll make sure you're laughed out of town before the gavel drops." His words, triple the cruelty of Victor's, were a battering ram meant to crush my resolve. I gripped the courthouse bench, my pulse a war cry, torn between shouting back and letting his taunt fuel my fire. The father in me, who'd once taught Ethan to ride a horse, ached for a world where loyalty wasn't a lie. But Gerald's threat was a 68th betrayal, a vow to humiliate me to protect their scam. I saved the text, my hand steady, each word a stone I'd hurl at their empire. The second shock came as Diane's phone pinged with a message from a new ally, Javier, a court clerk who'd worked Ethan's galas. "I found a sealed file," he wrote. "Your name on a fake charity trust. Millions diverted to Vantage Holdings, signed by Isabella's uncle Raul." My breath stopped, the courtroom air thick with betrayal. A 69th betrayal, not just Ethan, but a family syndicate, turning my name into a charity front while I dodged utility shutoffs. Javier's courage, risking his job, was a third shock, a spark in the dark, but it deepened the wound of Ethan's choice, a son who'd built his empire on my ruin. I stood in the courthouse hall, the marble cold under my feet, my heart a battlefield of love and rage. I saw Ethan at 29, his hand on mine as we toasted his first venture, now forging my name for trusts and jets. The pain was a volcano, erupting through every memory, but it sharpened my resolve. The fourth shock hit as my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Marcus, his voice a broken plea. "Henry, you're killing us. Sign a confession, and we'll settle quietly." His offer was a 70th betrayal, a friend bartering my truth for his freedom. I replayed it, each word a splinter in our past, my chest aching for the man who'd shared my victories. I wanted to believe he was trapped, but the truth was steel. He'd chosen their empire over me. The fifth shock came as Sarah slipped into the hall, her eyes blazing with Texas grit. "Javier got a tape," she whispered, handing me a USB drive. "Isabella bribing a DA to drop your case." The tape was a sixth shock, a 71st betrayal, proof their scheme reached into justice itself. Sarah's loyalty, rallying allies like Javier, was a seventh shock, a shield. But it couldn't erase the image of Ethan's silence, as Isabella corrupted the law. The sixth shock was a text from Victor, his words a public execution. "Sullivan's done, y'all. His millions are a myth." Forwarded to Houston's elite, it was a 72nd betrayal, a lie meant to bury my truth in their laughter. The seventh shock came as I passed a courthouse television, a reporter sneering. "Sullivan's fraud unmasked, millions hoarded." The story, planted by Isabella, was a 73rd betrayal, a public crucifixion to drown my fight in ridicule. My legacy was now a headline, mocked in every bar from Houston to Austin. The eighth shock landed as Tom called, his voice shaking. "Found a letter Ethan to Raul, planning to leak fake bank statements to frame you." The letter was a ninth shock, a 74th betrayal, their scheme now a financial trap. Tom's courage was a 10th shock, but it underscored the danger closing in. The ninth shock came as Rachel texted, "Found a chat log Isabella and Greg plotting to seize your assets via a fake bankruptcy." The log was an 11th shock, a 75th betrayal, their plan to strip my last dime. Rachel's bravery was a 12th shock, a light in the storm, but it deepened the pain of Ethan's complicity. The 10th shock was a knock at Diane's office, where Clara waited, her hands clutching a photo. "From Javier," she said. "Isabella paying a judge to seal your case. The photo was a 13th shock, a 76th betrayal, their scheme corrupting the courts. Clara's loyalty was a 14th shock, but it couldn't erase the pain of Ethan's silence, his boyhood dreams now a nightmare. My mind spun, love for Ethan battling a fury so raw it threatened to consume me. I saw him at 32, his hand in mine as we celebrated his empire, now signing my name to my ruin. The grief was a tsunami, but I was learning to stand. Diane's office smelled of ink and justice, her desk a war room of truth. She laid out the plan. Javier's file, Sarah's tape, Tom's letter, Rachel's chat log, Clara's photo, Paul's testimony, Elena's letter, Maria's documents. Each was a vow to reclaim my name. The Houston skyline glared, its towers a mirror of Isabella's ambition, but I was no longer her shadow. Sarah, Luis, Tom, Clara, Rachel, Elena, Paul, Maria, Carla, Javier, and Diane were my army, their courage a fire matching mine. Ethan, Isabella, Victor, Marcus, Gerald, Frank, Leo, Greg, and Raul thought they'd erased me, but I was rising and their empire was crumbling. The Houston afternoon sun seared through the courthouse's high windows, casting a fierce glow across my notebook, now a sacred testament to truth. Javier's sealed charity trust file, Sarah's tape of Isabella's DA bribe, Tom's letter framing me for tax evasion, Rachel's chat log of the PI tale, Luis's recording of Victor's trust fund forgery, Clara's photo of Isabella's judge payoff, Paul's jet loan testimony, Elena's senator letter, Maria's yacht documents, and Carla's Miami condo contract. The weight of Ethan's $24 million lie was a furnace in my chest, a theft that turned my name into a currency for their empire while I lived on borrowed courage and a creaking chair. My heart was a crucible, forging love for Ethan against the molten fury of his betrayal. I saw him at 26, his laugh ringing as we fished off Galveston Pier, now silenced by the reality of his 76th betrayal, a son who'd let Isabella and her allies chain my legacy to their greed. I wanted to believe he was lost, not heartless, but the evidence was a wildfire, and I was done burning. This courtroom was my battlefield, and I was ready to reclaim my name with the knowledge of truth as my weapon. The first shock of the trial roared in like a hurricane. A text from Isabella, her Houston street venom sharper than a blade. "You're a dead man walking, you broke-ass fossil," she hissed. "We'll make sure you're laughed out of this city before the jury sits." Her words, triple the cruelty of Gerald's, were a wrecking ball meant to shatter my resolve. I gripped the bench, my pulse a war cry, torn between cursing her back and letting her threat fuel my fire. The father in me, who'd once taught Ethan to tie a knot, ached for a world where loyalty wasn't a myth, but Isabella's taunt was a 77th betrayal, a vow to destroy my dignity to protect their scam. I saved the text, my hands steady, each word a stone I'd hurl at their empire, armed with the knowledge of their deceit. The second shock came as Diane's phone buzzed with a message from a new ally. Rosa, a paralegal at Ethan's firm. "I found a hidden email," she wrote. "Ethan to Raul, planning to forge your signature on a Caribbean estate sale, millions diverted to Vantage Holdings." My breath stopped, the courtroom air thick with betrayal. A 78th betrayal, not just Ethan, but his family turning my name into a tropical asset while I fought off eviction. Rosa's courage, risking her career, was a third shock, a spark in the dark, but it deepened the wound of Ethan's choice, a son who'd built his empire on my ruin. The knowledge of this betrayal burned, but it fueled my fight for justice. I stood in the courtroom, the marble cold under my feet, my heart a battlefield of love and rage. I saw Ethan at 30, his hand on mine as we toasted his first billion, now forging my name for estates and jets. The pain was a volcano, erupting through every memory, but it sharpened my resolve, teaching me the education of standing firm. The fourth shock hit as my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Gerald Hayes, his voice a drunken sneer. "Sullivan, your sob story's a flop. Your millions are laughing at you." Forwarded to Houston's elite, it was a 79th betrayal, a lie meant to drown my truth in their smirks. The shame was a tidal wave, but the knowledge of my allies' courage kept me afloat. The fifth shock came as Sarah slipped into the courtroom, her eyes blazing with Texas grit. "Rosa got a video," she whispered, handing me a USB drive. Isabella bribing a jury foreman to sway the verdict. The video was a sixth shock, an 80th betrayal, proof their scheme corrupted the very room I stood in. Sarah's loyalty, rallying allies like Rosa, was a seventh shock, a shield, but it couldn't erase the image of Ethan's silence as Isabella tainted justice. The education of their greed was a bitter lesson, but it strengthened my resolve. The sixth shock was a text from Victor, his words a public execution, Sullivan's finished, y'all. His millions are a joke. Forwarded to Houston's elite. It was an 80. First betrayal. A lie meant to bury my truth in laughter. The seventh shock came as I glanced at a courthouse television, a reporter sneering. Sullivan's scam unravels, millions hoarded. The story, planted by Isabella, was an 80-second betrayal, a public crucifixion to drown my fight in ridicule. My legacy was now a soundbite, mocked in every bar from Houston to San Antonio, but the education of truth was my armor. The eighth shock landed, as Tom called, his voice shaking. Found a contract, Ethan, to Greg, selling your old oil rigs to Vantage Holdings, your name forged. The contract was a ninth shock, an 83rd betrayal, their scheme now looting my past. Tom's courage was a 10th shock, but it underscored the danger closing in. The ninth shock came as Rachel texted, "Found a text chain, Isabella and Leo, planning to frame you for fraud with fake invoices." The chain was an 11th shock, an 84th betrayal, their plan to bury me in lies. Rachel's bravery was a 12th shock, a light in the storm, but it deepened the pain of Ethan's complicity. The 10th shock was a knock at Diane's office, where Clara waited, her hands clutching a note. "From Rosa," she said. "Isabella paid a hacker to plant fake debts in your name." The note was a 13th shock, an 85th betrayal, their scheme now a digital war. Clara's loyalty was a 14th shock, but it couldn't erase the pain of Ethan's silence, his boyhood dreams now a nightmare. My mind spun, love for Ethan battling a fury so raw it threatened to consume me. I saw him at 33, his hand in mine as we celebrated his empire, now signing my name to my ruin. The grief was a tsunami, but the education of standing tall taught me to stand. The trial began, and Diane presented our case. Rosa's email, Sarah's video, Tom's contract, Rachel's texts, Clara's note, Javier's file, Paul's testimony, Elena's letter, Maria's documents, Carla's contract. The jury's verdict came swift. Guilty on all counts: elder financial abuse, tax fraud, forgery, conspiracy. Ethan and Isabella faced years in prison, their empire crumbling. Unlike the original tale, I chose not to speak publicly. I walked away, letting the truth stand alone, and settled in a quiet Houston suburb, teaching others the knowledge and education of guarding their names. The lesson was clear: betrayal may wound, but truth heals, and love doesn't erase consequences. The education of this journey taught me to stand, not for revenge, but for the human value of dignity. To the viewers of RevengeX, I ask, what does this story stir in you? How does it echo your own life's betrayals or triumphs? Share your thoughts below. Hit that subscribe button, like, and share our channel for more gripping tales daily. Your comments, raw and real, are the heart of our community. Wishing you strength, health, and health in a joyful, peaceful life. Farewell, and see you in the next video.